first book, which is Trail of Crumbs, which was a memoir with recipes. And then I'm going to move on to another section that touches on Korea as well in the new book, which is actually a cookbook with stories. November 1973 was when I first got lucky. I was a scrawny 3-year-old sitting on a bench in a South Korean marketplace waiting for Oma to come back and take me home. My Oma, my mother, had left me a tiny fistful of food that had crumbled in the 3 days and nights of waiting. Endless hours of darkness with huge shadows and no promise of return. When local policemen finally brought me into the station, I shook my clenched fist at them. As they proceeded with abandonment papers, I scrambled to the ground to gather the crumbs, insisting, "She told me not to leave. She promised she'd be back." Of course, I don't remember everything. The policemen, for example, shady contributors to my first days as an orphan, are figures I am told existed like in any ordinary fairy tale. But I wonder now how they could have left a child alone for 3 days and nights. I imagine it was a time of survival for most. It was the early 70s in a country still searching for an identity after decades of war and division. And there were lots of us, abandoned or lost, and perhaps many, like myself, still questioning where it is we're really from. Although memories are distorted, there are true sensations one doesn't forget, like fear and hunger, deep rumblings echoing in a cavernous heart and belly. I still see rat-colored streets try to focus in on market vendors, the swift movements of street cooks. I am forever trying to decipher a familiar face. I want warmth and a mouthful of hot fermented cabbage, a bowl of plain rice. My adoptive mother keeps changing the story every time I ask her. I don't think she does it on purpose, but she has repeated the circumstances of my adoption many times over the years, and always with discrepancies. Sometimes she insists I was never in an orphanage, and I stayed with an American serviceman and his Korean wife. But according to certain documents, I was also at the Star of the Sea orphanage. I'm sure I was there because there are photos. I'm wearing an oversized polka dot dress, sitting on a tattered sofa, squeezed between an Asian boy my age and a little girl much younger. There's another picture of me with other children who look as hollow as I do, lined up like rows of fruit for sale. We're looking not at the camera but beyond, as if expecting someone, anyone, to come and press on our skins to test for ripeness and cart us home. The few papers I do have, documents from this period, state Dapdong, Incheon City, Republic of Korea, Special City of Seoul. The address of an old woman who is superior of the Star of the Sea, but nothing else is really decipherable. Nightmares sometimes help discern what's true and false. My Korean brother, I remember, as younger but taller, huddles over me as we look out over the busy streets of our village. His skin is smooth and warm and glows golden, like the color of the moon in cold months. Below, women waddle back and forth, carrying baskets of fruit on their heads all day long. We take turns standing guard, searching for our Oma among them. We are convinced that our mother is one of the fruit ladies. But it gets dark fast, and the house fills up with damp shadows before we can even sense her shape. In a letter dated 1973 or 74, my adoptive mother writes to her family back in New Orleans that she and my father, on leave from Okinawa, have decided to adopt an infant girl, a newborn, abandoned on a doorstep. But, she writes, there is also another child who comes every day and jumps in our laps. I am that other girl. My mother continues to explain that I was found on a bench in the marketplace, cigarette burns stamped into my arms and shoulders. When the policeman finally brought me into the station, I told them defiantly that I was 3 years old, and I was waiting for my mother to return. I held up a scarred fist, smeared with soot and starch, and shook it at them. She's only 23 pounds, but perhaps she is older, because they say she speaks a strange yet beautiful Korean. The curious thing, my mother concludes, is they reported that I never cried. Somewhere in the world is a man who sized me up, measured me, and estimated my bones, a type of carbon dating for lost children. I imagine him with pen and paper, arriving at the Star of the Sea to count heartbeats, trace circles, and check teeth. Maybe he added up the number of burns and bruises, calculated that I wasn't missing too many pounds before deciding that I too was fit for adoption. Born between January and June, the doctor announced, maybe a Pisces. He validated me and decided my place among the stars. My birth date is a compromise. My beginnings, a constellation of in-betweens and connect the dots. Since the approximate age of 3, I've been a fish and swimming upstream ever since. There is no room for tears. Instead, I swim holding my breath. I've learned to ration the air, so vital, for when I return to the surface of the sea, when it is safe to drift near the coastline of a warm and secure body. I got really emotional from your reading. Thank you. And then, do I have time to read another little section? Okay. This is also from Trail of Crumbs. It kind of goes back to language. Your refrigerator smells like Korea, I tell Grammy, plugging my nose. P.U., it stinks. My new grandmother laughs, sticks her head in, and pulls out a rotting pineapple from the fruit drawer. I shove my way in too, because I want to smell Korea. She's so little, and look how she squats, just like in the Orient, my father remarks. They say their muscle structure is different. I only hear the word different and plop down butterfly style on the kitchen floor in front of the open refrigerator. If it smells like Korea, maybe there are others in there who squat different like me, I think. It's cool inside, with lots of colors I don't have words for yet. I try the new ones my grandmother tries to teach me. Hot dog, Cool Whip, Tabasco. What would you like, Kim Sunée? She pronounces my name slowly, like the new words she teaches me. Words from books and magazines with shiny pictures of people with big creases down the middle of the page that tears their smiles in two. I point to a bowl of lump crab meat because I worked really hard to help my grandfather dig it out of its shell. It smells like the sea and lights like pearls. This is in New Orleans. How about cookies and milk? They say. All the American kids want cookies and milk. But I'm not like the other kids she's talking about. In my school, some are black, most are white, but no others have hair like me. They eat brownies and red Jell-O and drink lots of white milk. Cookies, I say, no milk. I watch carefully as my grandmother takes out the red carton with the white smiling cow. I tilt my head as she pours some in a glass, and I see the photo of the girl who looks my age. Who's that, I ask her. But I know exactly who the girl is. I know they put faces of disappeared people on the milk, so in the morning when you're feeding your bones, you can grow strong to help find those missing faces. Brown milk, I say, crossing my fingers, hoping that my new grandmother knows I want the dark syrup in the squeeze bottle that swirls everything white into something sweet. There's this common theme here about being an outsider or not quite belonging or growing up in cultures that were very different. And even though we were supposed to be part of that, we really weren't part of that for physical reasons or cultural. So I think that whether as a writer or as a woman or as a human being, just trying to find that place where we can feel at home, and it doesn't have to be a physical address necessarily. And for me, I think a lot of it is going back again to food and how hunger is such a metaphor for everything that's missing in our lives, whether it's love or home or real hunger, as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think that especially the giving and the cooking for people, and everywhere I've traveled and been, I've so easily found myself, not necessarily at the table, but behind in the kitchen or with the old grannies in the back who are making the dishes or shopping at the market. And So I think that that is grounding, and that's one way where you can actually have something tangible that someone can give to you and that you can create and give back. And I think that home and love and identity and those circumstances, as ephemeral as they are, they're very concrete in those ways.